Welcome to the Every Brain is Different podcast. We're here with Bryson Tarbet. He is a former pre-K through sixth grade music teacher turned instructional coach. He is a passionate advocate for inclusive music education. With degrees in music education and a background in elementary intervention, he champions sensory and emotionally inclusive classrooms. Inspired by his own neurodiverse journey, as the founder of That Music Teacher LLC, he shares expertise through the music podcast and the Elementary Music Summit, supporting educators nationwide. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have another musician on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to see what we
Yeah.
can get into today.
Yeah, I'm excited. So, can you tell us a little bit more about how you're involved in the neurodivergent community?
For sure. So I was diagnosed as a child with ADHD. And that was kind of the thing that I did the whole thing. I was like, all right, this is who I am as a learner. And then I started going into school. And when I started teaching, that's when there was more of these red flags that were kind of going off. Come to find out, I was also, as an adult, diagnosed with sensory processing disorder, which as a music teacher, especially, there were a lot of like, oh, that makes a lot of sense as to why I'm going home at the end of the day completely just worn out, because the music classroom is a very sensory dense classroom. And in my professional life as an elementary music teacher, I dove really deep into universal design for learning to create more inclusive classrooms, especially for neurodiverse individuals. And then, like you said, I now run my company full time, where I do a lot of different things, but focus primarily on coaching teachers. And one of my favorites is creating more inclusive classrooms.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yes, I can understand how music classrooms can be very sensory dense. What did you do? Like, how was school for you growing up? Like, how did you react to school, the school environment, or did you feel supported, or just what was that like for you going through the school diagnosed with ADHD?
Yeah, so that's definitely something that I've done a lot of thinking about over the years. I had the benefit of being raised by two teachers, so I think that is what part of what led to my early diagnosis. But with that being said, I never got a 504 or an IEP or things like IEP or anything like that. And quite frankly, looking back, like I feel like a 504 would have been really helpful, because I was that typical kid where I was like, all right, I'm gonna do my absolute best during school, even if it means when the moment the car door shuts at parent pickup, I completely break down. And that's exactly what happened. My parents, God bless them, I was not easy. That 3 o'clock time was when everything, all bets were off, and I turned into a terror a lot of the times, because I was just exhausted. I was just done masking. I was done trying to figure out how to do all the right things, and I just had nothing left to give. And that's something that I've done a lot of thinking about as an educator and as a parent, of like, how do all these different things fit together? And I don't know, I'm not sure if I have any better solutions for the way that I went through school. I definitely would wish I would have had more information about who I was as a learner in undergrad. I think that would have saved me a lot of stress of getting through undergrad, especially as a music major. But we're here to tell the tale, and I think that part of the reason I'm so passionate about neurodiversity and creating inclusive environments is because of, even if I didn't know it at the time, there were parts of my educational upbringing where I didn't quite fit in, or where I was kind of working against the grain and I needed to give a little bit more than maybe was necessary at the time.
Yeah, I really appreciate how you talked about like kind of having that meltdown almost like after school, because that is so common with kids that we support, that their parents were like, they're fine at school. What am I doing wrong? That they have a meltdown as soon as they get in my car or as soon as they get home.
Um,
And I say, you're not doing anything wrong. You're doing right things. Like you're supporting them and they've been masking all day long. And so they have to have somewhere safe to go where they can just be themselves. So I really appreciate you talking about that. And the whole undergrad as a music major thing, oh my word, it is
I have a
so
lot of thoughts.
overwhelming. It is so overwhelming. I get it. You have to play instruments, you have to practice those instruments on top of taking all the classes that are
Yeah.
ridiculous. And that is for another day. But yes, I feel your pain because, oh, it was a lot. And I don't know if people know this, but they put music classes as lower credit amounts so that you can fit all the classes
Yep, because
in.
otherwise you'd be over capacity. I'm like, no, I'm
Yeah.
still over capacity. You're just
Yeah.
not counting this as a full class.
Yeah. Like
I
I
love the
had
idea of it.
I have 6 classes plus practice time, while my peers and other majors have 3 or 4 classes, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so overwhelmed." I'm like, "Stop. Just
You're
anyway,
like,
this is
yes.
yeah. This is just for people who your kids might be going into a music major. Just prepare them. Like I loved my major, but it is a lot. So, yes. But let's talk more about music and the power of music and arts in brain development. What can you tell me about that?
Oh, this is one of those things where I keep telling myself I can't go get another degree until I figure out first pay off my first two. But this topic right there, it gets me going. I'm like, but maybe there's just so much research that I mean, I'm sure that supports just how the brain activates differently when in the process or when in the process of music making or listening to music or students that and children that interact with music on a regular basis. My favorite part is the corpus callosum, right? It's the point between the two hemispheres of your brain, and it actually gets thicker, making more efficient. Basically, your brain, your two hemispheres of your brain, are able to talk to each other more efficiently because of the act of going through music. And that's when going through grad school, we were always talking about my corpus callosum is thicker. Like we were being the absolute most. But the reality is music literally changes the brain and helps make things more efficient. And even if we ignored the emotional side of how music can help in development, which is not something to be ignored, just the act of how neuroplasticity and music are interconnected is just it's such an interesting rabbit hole. And it's one of those things where there's no end. You can just keep going and finding more, and that takes you to something else. And it's such an interesting in neurodiversity. That one of my hyperfixations sometimes is how music literally physically changes the brain.
Yes. And I could talk about that all day long. I do full like hour-and-a-half presentations on how music can change the brain. And I like that you brought up neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity, for those who don't know, is just the brain's ability to change itself. And what's really cool about music is it can go across, like it uses both hemispheres in the brain. And so if one side is injured, you can use music and access the other side and then create new neural pathways to heal the brain, which is so cool.
So fascinating.
Yes, okay, Lauren's like, you guys. So it's really, so with that information, I think it's really important for neurodiverse kids to be able to access music, be able to learn music and get those benefits. But like you said earlier, the music classroom can be a very sensory dense place. So what like inclusive strategies could we use for kids being in an arts classroom?
I do a lot of work with teachers who are ready to do the work of making more inclusive classrooms. They just don't know where to start. And quite frankly, a lot of administrators don't know where to direct them either. We I lovingly refer to the episode of Schitt's Creek where Moira is telling David how to fold in the cheese, and they're literally just saying the same words over and over again and giving no definition. But that's what really goes on in a lot of these settings where we'll just differentiate, make it more accessible, and everyone's like, how? So one of the easiest things, especially the sensory side of things, having things like over-the-ear headphones can be really helpful. Having fidgets available. I mean, I'm right here while recording using my amazing Tangle. Having things like that accessible, but also modeled as just available for everyone. For instance, in my classroom, fidgets were available for everyone that wanted them. Headphones, I had like 15 pairs. Whoever wanted them can go get them. I myself wore earplugs a lot of the time, especially when we were doing things like recorders or glockenspiels that were incredibly sensory dense. And I think part of it comes to understanding student needs, which is really tricky, especially in an arts classroom where the teacher will have hundreds of students. They're likely not involved in all the conversations going on about student needs. But then also the other side of it is, all right, now what do we do once we have those student needs? How do we make sure that our classrooms are inclusive and more than just putting a stamp on, say, oh, this is inclusive, but like, how can we actually identify and remove those barriers? And that's where a lot of my work has been lately, which is I've developed what I call the domains of accessibility, which is essentially just a lens of looking at things so that you can see all of the potential areas that we can identify barriers and then remove those barriers. And those are it's a constant process. It's not something you do once and it's done. And I will say the vast majority of arts educators are ready to do the work. It's just a lot of times the system's really working against us. And I think so incredibly frustrating and something I hope to change as I continue to get to do my work through my company.
Yeah, definitely. I like how you said make it available for everyone and not just maybe singling out the kids who are neurodivergent that need those things because kids already feel singled out. They
Mhm.
know they're different. And so if you can just say, hey, I have these up here, anyone can use them. I feel like kids who are neurodivergent might actually use them more instead of
Yes.
just suffering in silence or just not going to the class and causing an issue so they don't have to go to class. I know that that's a common thing that if a kid knows that a place is going to be overwhelming, they will cause a problem so they don't have to go to the class so that they can just stay somewhere else. My son, like I was telling you about in the summit podcast, that he like took himself to the bathroom and stayed there for 2 hours because he didn't want to go to the music class because it was too overwhelming for him. And they sat him right underneath the speaker. So that
Yeah.
was even more overwhelming for him. So kids will find a way to not be in a sensory overstimulation situation if you don't problem solve with them and help come up with a better solution. Like they'll find their own
Yeah.
solution, whether you like it or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, I mean, with the fidgets and with the headphones, I that is always like the first thing I talk about when I talk about removing barriers. And the initial pushback from teachers is always, well, how do I make that not chaos? And the reality is it's going to be chaos for a little bit, but eventually the novelty is going to wear off. So the students that really don't care, they're going to stop using it. But those students that are able to get the benefit that maybe wouldn't necessarily have used it in the first place had it been not available to everyone, they're going to keep using it, but everyone else is just going to let it go. And on top of that, inclusivity, sometimes it's not this yes or no. For instance, with the headphones, sometimes a student might come to class and they don't really care about the headphones, but on this day they have a migraine or an ear infection. That is an accommodation that, because it's available for that student, is able to help that student, even though that wasn't necessarily our intention as we when we moved into the lesson. That wasn't the reason I have those headphones, but it was able to allow that student to to access the space and access the curriculum, which is the whole the whole point of removing barriers is for everyone.
Yeah, so everyone, even if they're not diagnosed with something, even if they don't have a 504, even if they don't have an IEP,
Yes.
that it's still an inclusive classroom.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Hey everyone, Samantha here, and I'm thrilled to invite you to join me for something special, the Parenting Power Hour. This is your chance, parents of neurodivergent kids, to bring your questions directly to me and fellow parents in the room. We're here to help you develop actionable plans that really work so you can finally stop the meltdowns and find peace in your home. As a mom to 3 kids with ADHD and autism, I've seen and been through the challenges too. So trust me, we'll find solutions together that fit your family. Don't miss out on the Parenting Power Hour. It's a free online monthly gathering every second Thursday of the month from 12:45 to 1:45 Mountain Standard Time. Visit everybrainisdifferent.com to reserve your spot today. Do you have any recommendations of what maybe to put in an IEP if a parent is concerned that their kid isn't being supported appropriately in a music class?
Ooh, that's a really good question because the 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 reality is for the vast majority of arts teachers, we just don't have the time to go page by page all through all of the different IEPs that we have. So whenever possible, be very specific. If there's, for instance, like you were talking about your son being under the speaker, that doesn't necessarily need to be in an IEP. But if it's in an IEP, we have to follow it. And like that's the thing that to make it really all right, this needs to happen. So what are some strategies that would be acceptable in this environment? So for me, if I were a student today, I would really need over the ear headphones available. So whether it be a 504 IIP or whatever, having that specifically laid out that I have that accommodation available would be really important to me because at that point it becomes more specific. Speaking of specific, one of the things that just kind of grinds my gears about IEPs in general is the accommodation preferred seating because very very rarely is that actually defined in what is helpful. So for some students, preferred seating is at the back so they're not getting distracted by other people. Some could be close to the teacher, some could be farther away from the teacher. And especially in a music classroom where things are moving around, it's really hard for us to figure out what that means. So whether we actually specify this in the IEP or just have that conversation between the parent or the student and the teacher, specifying some of these accommodations that might have been applied in a general education setting that might still be really important and really helpful in a music setting or an art setting or wherever, but it's not a one-to-one transference. So having that conversation, I think, is really important because it creates clarity, and I am a firm believer that clarity is just so helpful. Clear is kind, and I think that's something that we don't see enough about when we're talking about having these conversations between all of the people involved in the learning of this child.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just to have conversations and ask your kid, include your kid in the
Yes.
conversations. So I had no idea that they were putting my son under the speaker. I had no idea that it was bugging him so much until he came to me and said, I can't do this anymore. I can't be under the speaker anymore. And so ask your kids, like, hey, what do you think would help you in this situation? And maybe give them some ideas or just listen to what they have to say. Because a lot of times they might know what they need, but they just haven't verbalized what they need.
If any teacher who might be listening at any point, the question, how can I help you be successful? That question right there, not only does it flip it around of how can I help? How can you do this? How can you be better? But like, how can I help you be more successful? One, it's telling, hey, I really do care about what you think. Is there something that I'm missing? But also it flips it on to I really am trying to help, and it can help build that relationship, which is another thing. It's a lot harder with classes where you don't get to see them all day every day. Is it's hard to not only build a relationship but understand the student needs when you only get to see them for 40 minutes every 5 days. If you notice a student that's struggling, just pull them aside and say, hey, how can I help you be successful? Any ideas? And like really take it to heart. I think is a really good way to model that you don't have all the answers, but also model that they have the opportunity to advocate for themselves in this space.
Yes, that's amazing. Yes, just ask them that. That's amazing. Do you have any resources or any resources that you recommend to parents?
Oh, there's so many good ones out there. I mean, I think wherever you can get diverse perspectives, so perspectives from educators, perspectives from parents, perspectives from people that have these neurodiverse individuals themselves, those can be great ways to just get the ball rolling. I think it can be really easy to equate one experience with the experience of everyone. So just kind of keep that understanding in the back of your head as you're listening to, if you find a podcast or if you're reading a book or something, that this might not be true or entirely true of every individual. But honestly, I think just going and finding diverse perspectives rather than getting stuck in one bubble or one column of opinion can be really helpful, because not only does it help you understand, all right, I think this would be a great strategy to try, or I think this would be this is a great way to think of it. It also shows you non-examples. Someone might recommend a strategy that you're like, I just as a person don't think that that is appropriate. And you start to build your own. When I work with teachers, we call it our teacher gut, right? You're building your gut of, I don't think this is going to work. Not saying you have to always stick by that gut and dig your heels in, but I think by having diverse perspectives can really help you just get more context of what's all out there.
Yes, absolutely. That is a great suggestion. The next thing is, how can people find you online if they want to learn more about what you do or anything like that? If they want to connect with you.
Yeah, I am all about continuing this conversation, especially in the whole arts integration and creating inclusive art spaces. The best place to reach out to me is on Instagram. I hang out over there at That Music Teacher, but then you can also learn more about what my company and I do at thatmusicteacher.com.
Awesome. Thank you. And our last question is, what do you do for fun?
That is a really tricky question, because quite honestly, up until the point where I left the classroom in May, I ran my business for fun. So I guess we're kind of in this discovery moment of figuring out what that means when I'm not working all the time. I will say right now, I have a 3-year-old foster son, so he keeps me busy. We do a lot of a lot of music, which is great because I'm like, yes, I have this skill. So that he keeps me busy. And that's really kind of what brings me the most of the joy right now is just being able to see him experience life and all the ups and downs and lefts and rights that come with having a 3-year-old.
Oh yeah, 3-year-olds are so fun, but they are so they can be they're just trying to kill themselves all the time,
Yes.
I guess. Like they just get into
Needy,
trouble. Yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just like, I just want to keep you alive. Like, why are you doing this? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate your time and all the things that you shared with us. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, Lauren, thank you for letting us geek out for a little bit about music in the brain.
I was gonna say, I think one of my favorite things that I love about my ADHD friends is that I thoroughly enjoy when they go on about something that they're like on or hyper focused on, like whatever that passion is in that moment. Even though it's not like something that I particularly like might be interested in or whatever, but like just seeing the passion in them like makes me really happy. And so I'm totally here for it. So I love that. I love the passion about it. I I think I don't think it's talked about enough just how therapeutic music is in so many aspects of life and like for everyone. Like it doesn't like it goes across like borders and language and all of that stuff. And so I really appreciate that. And sometimes I don't feel like it's talked about enough. I mean, even like you, like trying to find a music therapist sometimes, like a legitimate one. I don't know. I think it should be encouraged and celebrated.
Yeah,
Considered an
definitely.
actual therapy. In some places it's not, and so things like
Yeah.
that. I appreciated the and you kind of mentioned this too, like letting everyone have access to some of these things like fidgets or headphones and that inclusion because it gets rid of barriers for everyone, whether you need it or not. It may and so and I feel like some people fight that sometimes and like it's not a detriment in any way. It can only make at least one person's life better. It doesn't hurt anybody. And so I like that. And then clear is kind, clarity, being specific. I like that clear is kind. And I kind of didn't really think about it until he brought it up. But yeah, that being it's not a one-to-one transference, like that general education classroom is very different than an arts class or a music's class and how it's set up and how it's structured. And so being more specific in those needs that you might need for those specific times, I think can be pretty helpful. So I thought that was really good advice to parents.
Yeah, I thought he had great ideas for inclusivity, and I really like how he said make it available to anyone so you're not singling anyone out. And then also, if you're not diagnosed with something, if people don't know that maybe the kid is having issues, then they can just use the things there without having to have an official diagnosis, without
Yeah.
having to be like have an IEP or anything like that. Like they can just use it if they need it. And
Yeah.
they might not need it every day, like he said, but if they're having a migraine or they have a
Mhm.
headache or they're just overstimulated that day, like everyone gets sometimes.
Right. And that's what I think about like with that inclusion and like making things easier. Like I think about like wheelchair ramps. Some days like I don't want to be crawling up steps. I want to walk a slow incline.
Yeah.
And so even though it wasn't built for me to do that, but it made my day easier that day. Right.
Yeah.
And again, you only know your reality. And so if you can listen and gain other people's perspective, I think the more knowledge and the more help you might find and techniques and all of that, like I highly encourage it.
Yeah. And if you want to learn more about neurodivergence, talk to neurodivergent people, read books by neurodivergent people, and just get their perspective. And not everyone obviously has the same perspective, like he said. And so get different perspectives on it and don't just get pigeonholed into one way of
Yeah.
thinking.
And I think we've said this, if you've met one person, like that's just one person. And
Yeah.
again, it's so different across the board with everybody. You
Yeah,
can't just take that one person as that's why you need that diverse perspective.
for sure. I like it. Well, Bryson was a panelist at our Neurodiversity and Harmony Summit. So if you want to catch the replay of that, you can go to everybrainisdifferent.com and get inside that. There is a fee. It's like $57 to get the replay. So you get all the trainings from all the panelists and then the replay of the actual summit. So if that interests people, go to everybrainisdifferent.com. And thank you all for listening this week. Let us know if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, and we will see you next week.